So I've been making my way through the Exorcist series, and today I'm going to be talking about Exorcist The Beginning. And this is a prequel to the original Exorcist film. And here we find Father Merrin right after the end of World War II in East Africa, where he first encounters the demon Pazuzu. But before I get into it, welcome back to The Haunted Beard, everybody. It is all horror and thriller movie content on my channel. And listen, do not click that subscribe button unless you want to be haunted by the beard. And as I said, this tells the story of Father Merrin's initial encounter with Pazuzu and is also a story about the rediscovery of his faith. As we learn early on in the movie that Father Merrin has lost his faith due to the experiences in World War II, seeing the Nazis and experiencing the evils and atrocities that humanity is capable of has caused Father Merrin to lose his faith. So there's no sense in me really beating around the bush and delaying this. Exorcist The Beginning is not a very good film. I think really the best part of this is Father Merrin and Stellan Skarsgard's performance of the character it's respectable, it's pretty decent. I think also too, the opening 20, maybe 30 minutes or so of the movie kind of sets up a fairly interesting story. At least for me, it was starting off and I was kind of like, okay, this isn't too bad. We find Father Merrin. He's in Cairo, Egypt. It's 1949. This priest finds him and he wants him to help with this excavation site that they found this Christian church in East Africa, which shouldn't be there. Christianity didn't spread to that region of the world until 1,000 years later. And so they found this church that really shouldn't be there. And so he goes to the excavation site to go find out what's going on. And so I like the initial setup. I think you have a little bit of an element of mystery there, and you've got just some cool locations. I like sort of the bit of the Indiana Jones type vibe it gives you. I like Father Merrin's character. I think the setup is decent enough. I also think the idea of him going through this rediscovery of his faith is a really interesting idea, and I wish they would have executed that a lot better than they did. But after that initial setup, this thing turns into a pretty generic and ultimately a pretty boring movie overall. Now, the easiest thing to complain about here with Exorcist The Beginning is the now 20-year-old CGI, and this is tough because obviously technology evolves and grows, and so how fair is the criticism really to look at something 20 years old and criticize it for it not looking as good as it would today? But either way though, the CGI in this looks pretty bad. This has aged like a fine milk. There is a hyena sequence where these hyenas attack this young boy. They just look terrible. There's CGI birds, bats, flies. It all just looks really bad. Later on in the movie, when you get some real sort of demonic activity, there's some CGI with the demon that does not look good either. And also, too, the final shot of this film is so clearly filmed on a green screen as well. So it's just really shoddy. And I have to think, too, even in 2004, this would not have been very great. A lot of the execution of this just feels very generic, like we have seen it a million times before. And it's just really unfortunate because it's like you have a pretty solid template with the original Exorcist film to draw off of, to use as inspiration, to help you make good creative choices when you're making an exorcist and demon possession type movie. But this just goes a very traditional, seen it a million times type of route. And if you were to just simply compare some of the exorcist scenes in the original film to this, it's just night and day difference. This is just not even remotely in the same realm with some of the sequences in that original movie. Case in point, there's a scene about 45 or so minutes into the movie where one of the young boys in the little village that they're in, they suspect him to be possessed by a demon. And so Father Merrin and Sarah, who's the main woman that's introduced, she kind of becomes sort of like a love interest. They start tending to the boy, and you get a little bit of this sort of demonic possession scene. And again, it's just the most generic, standard demon possession type sequence where you get a lot of rapid fire, fast cuts, shaky camera movements, loud noises, loud music, and it's just really not effective at all. When you compare to the original film and how well crafted and constructed those scenes are, the original film, William Friedkin just simply lets the images speak for themselves. You don't need rapid fire editing. You don't need all these big loud noises and sounds. You just let the images speak for themselves. And this just feels so artificial and overproduced. It's just very standard, generic Hollywood demon possession stuff, again, that we have seen tons and tons of times before. You also get a handful of very lame and poorly attempted jump scares that are just horribly constructed, again, that we have seen many, many times before. There's a particular scene where the power goes out in the village that they're in, and Sarah is going to investigate. And of course, it's right after she gets out of the shower and she's in nothing but a towel, of course, because we've never seen that before. And she's walking through the house, and of course, it's dark and creepy. And then all of a sudden, without warning, the lights turn on and the radio volume is just blaring. And there's your jump scare. Again, it's just the most overused, we have seen this so many times type of a jump scare. And there's a handful of them in this movie. Again, there's just nothing here that we haven't seen so many times. And overall, I really just don't have a whole lot to say about this. There's just not much here that sticks out or is very memorable. At about 50 minutes, halfway through the movie, I wrote down, starting to get a little bored. And yeah, it's just a pretty boring experience overall. You get more of the same throughout the rest of the movie. Just very standard, overused jump scares. There's another demonic possession scene where some of the village people come in and they do this sort of tribalistic ritual with the young boy. Again, it's just more of the same stuff. They try to introduce a bit of a plot twist later on in the movie, but at that point, I just didn't really care all that much about the story anyways. But the priest who initially hired Merrin was hiding this secret. Merrin finds out that all the graves there in the village are empty. As it was this cover-up, there was this massacre there that occurred like 1,500 years ago that the Catholic Church was involved in. And this is the place they believe Lucifer fell to the earth. And so, of course, when they excavated the church, they unleashed Pazuzu and all the demonic forces and whatnot. And there's also a little twist, I guess, when you find out that Sarah was the wife of the previous archaeologist slash excavator guy who was there, who went insane. She was his wife. And then they find out that it's not the young kid who's possessed, it's actually Sarah. And so now, because Father Merrin has taken a liking to her, he has feelings for her, he's got to be the one to go rescue her and save her soul. Also, too, there's this war action sequence that really feels forced. And I have to think that Renny Harlin had to have played some factor in that, as much of his filmography is action films. But it just really feels out of place here. Ultimately, what happens is the British Army comes in and they start attacking the local tribes people, and you get this huge massacre, shootout, war zone type scene, and it just kind of feels all out of place. Ultimately, though, you get Father Merrin going to rescue and save Sarah, and we get this scene where he enters into the church, and he picks up a cross and recommits his faith to God. And to me, it was such this anticlimactic moment. This was a scene that is one of the major plot points or character points of the movie. It's his rediscovery of his faith. It does not land. It's a scene that should have had such more emotional impact, like this gut punch of this whole journey that he went on, this whole character arc. And it's almost like this throwaway, glossed over moment where he picks up a cross and is like, okay, God, I'm on your team again. And that's it. And it just doesn't land at all. So then we get the final sequence where Sarah, or Pazuzu, has the boy, and they are in the church underground. We get more bad CGI where she's doing acrobatics off the cross. It just looks really terrible. And then we get the final sequence where Sarah is running down this long hallway in the cave. It's just more bad CGI. It's slow motion. It just looks terrible. Nothing about it really works. It all just looks pretty bad. Like I said, there just isn't all that much to say about this. It's not a pleasant experience. There's not much here that really works or is effective or has aged well by any means. I think the setup is pretty interesting, but the execution of it is not great. So those are my thoughts on Exorcist The Beginning. It was a bit of a disappointment and a letdown for me, but those are my thoughts. Up next is Dominion, which is the prequel to The Exorcist. This is also going to be a first-time watch for me. And I've been reading up a little bit about some of the behind-the-scenes studio interference with director Paul Schrader and then them bringing on Renny Harlin to do this. And so I don't really know what to expect with this one because from what I understand, it's almost like the same movie. So I don't know how similar or how different it's going to be, but hopefully it's at least a little bit better than this one. I do tend to like Paul Schrader's movies more than Renny Harlin's, so fingers crossed, we'll see what happens. So anyways, yeah, that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you next time on The Haunted Beard.